They called him the King of Kings, the Lion of Judah, a man whose very name carried echoes of ancient prophecy. To his people, he was an emperor who stood as the last great monarch of Africa, resisting the tides of colonization when the continent was being carved apart. To the world, he was a symbol of dignity and defiance, a leader whose words still thunder across time in the halls of justice. But to his critics, he was also a man of contradictions, revered abroad yet questioned at home, celebrated as a divine figure while presiding over poverty and unrest. This is the story of Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, a story too often painted in black and white, but one that is in truth filled with color, complexity, and controversy. And whether you revere him as a saint, a statesman, or see him as a flawed ruler, one fact cannot be denied. Haile Selassie changed the course of Africa and left a legacy that still burns today, like fire that refuses to die. Haile Selassie was born Tafari Makonnen in 1892 in the ancient land of Ethiopia, a country unlike any other in Africa. While nearly all of the continent was swallowed by European empires, Ethiopia stood defiant, its soil unbowed to foreign flags. This was a land with a royal lineage tracing itself back to the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, a dynasty that claimed divine right, not through conquest but through sacred bloodlines. From his earliest years, Tafari was groomed not just for leadership, but for something greater, destiny. His father, Ras Makonnen, was a trusted general and governor under Emperor Menelik II, the hero who had crushed the Italians at the Battle of Adwa in 1896, proving to the world that Africa was not to be conquered so easily. It was in this atmosphere of pride and vigilance that Tafari was raised, and it forged in him both humility and unshakable ambition. As a boy, Tafari displayed intelligence far beyond his years. He mastered Ge'ez, Amharic, and French, devouring books on politics, philosophy, and history. But more importantly, he understood people. Even in childhood, he cultivated the aura of quiet authority, the ability to listen, calculate, and persuade. While other children played, Tafari dreamed of Ethiopia's future, one where modernity and tradition could walk hand in hand. Some elders scoffed at him, dismissing him as too slight, too reserved, too much of a dreamer. Yet beneath that calm surface, there was steel. The boy who seemed gentle was in fact a lion waiting for his roar. When Menelik II died, Ethiopia was thrown into a struggle for succession, a struggle in which Tafari's patience and political instincts began to shine. Rising steadily through ranks of nobility, he earned the title of Raz, making him one of the most powerful princes in the land. But what truly set him apart was his vision. While many nobles clung to old ways, Tafari saw that Ethiopia could not remain isolated. The world was changing. Europe's armies grew deadlier, their ambitions bolder. If Ethiopia was to survive, it had to modernize. It had to adopt technologies, diplomacy, and education systems that would strengthen the empire while preserving its independence. This balance would become the hallmark of his reign. In 1930, Tafari Makonnen was crowned Emperor Haile Selassie I, His Imperial Majesty, elect of God, King of Kings, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. The coronation was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Foreign dignitaries gathered in Addis Ababa, stunned by the splendor of Ethiopia's ancient traditions and the emperor's commanding presence. His crown glittered with jewels, his robes embroidered with gold, his title echoing the language of Scripture. To the faithful, he was more than a ruler, he was a chosen vessel of divine will. And in faraway Jamaica, his coronation was interpreted as prophecy fulfilled, sparking the rise of the Rastafari movement, a faith that revered Haile Selassie as the living God who would redeem the African people. Without ever setting foot in the Caribbean, Selassie had become a messiah, but reality soon tested the emperor's resolve. In 1935, Mussolini's fascist Italy invaded Ethiopia, seeking revenge for Adwa and dreaming of a new Roman Empire in Africa. The world watched as Italian bombers rained poison gas on soldiers and civilians alike, as modern war machines tore into Ethiopia's defenses. Haile Selassie, dressed in military uniform, rode among his troops, refusing to abandon his people. Yet even courage could not stop the devastation. Addis Ababa fell, and the emperor was forced into exile. For many rulers, exile would mean defeat, but Haile Selassie turned it into a weapon. In 1936, he stood before the League of Nations in Geneva, a lone African voice speaking against European aggression. His speech thundered across the chamber. "It is us today. It will be you tomorrow." He warned the world that the fascist menace would not stop with Ethiopia, that silence in the face of tyranny was complicity. The delegates listened in shame, some turning their heads, others pretending indifference. But history would prove him right. Within 3 years, Mussolini allied with Hitler, and the world was plunged into World War II. Haile Selassie had not only defended Ethiopia's honor, he had spoken for humanity itself. In 1941, with the help of British forces and Ethiopian patriots, Haile Selassie returned to Addis Ababa in triumph, reclaiming his throne. For his people, it was more than a military victory. It was a vindication. Ethiopia had been the only African nation to resist and outlast colonization, a beacon of pride in a continent scarred by foreign domination. Haile Selassie became the face of African independence, a living reminder that sovereignty could be defended, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But as the decades passed, the emperor's legacy grew more complicated. On one hand, he championed modernization, building schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, establishing Ethiopia as a founding member of the United Nations, and later, the Organization of African Unity. He became a voice for Pan-Africanism, urging newly independent nations to stand together against neocolonialism. His charisma inspired leaders from Kwame Nkrumah to Nelson Mandela, who saw in him a father figure of African dignity. Bob Marley's music immortalized him, and to Rastafarians worldwide, he was Jah incarnate, the divine redeemer. Few African leaders have commanded such global reverence, and yet within Ethiopia, shadows darkened his reign. The emperor held absolute power, and though he modernized parts of the state, he also resisted deeper reforms. Feudal landlords continued to dominate rural life. Peasants labored in poverty, and famine silently claimed lives even as the emperor entertained foreign dignitaries with opulence. Critics accused him of prioritizing image over substance, of maintaining grandeur while ignoring the suffering of his people. In the 1970s, famine in Wollo exposed the cracks of his rule, with images of starving Ethiopians shocking the world. Many asked, how could the elect of God allow such misery under his watch? The discontent boiled over. Students protested, soldiers mutinied, and revolution brewed. In 1974, Haile Selassie was overthrown in a coup by the Derg, a Marxist military junta. The once mighty emperor who had spoken before kings and presidents, who had been worshipped as divine, was dragged from his palace and placed under house arrest. The Lion of Judah was caged. A year later, in 1975, he died under mysterious circumstances. The official claim was natural causes, but whispers of assassination lingered. His body was buried in secret, without ceremony, as if his legacy could be erased. But history is never so easily buried. Decades later, in 2000, Haile Selassie's remains were reinterred in Addis Ababa's Trinity Cathedral, laid to rest with honors befitting an emperor. By then, his image had grown larger than life. For Ethiopians, he remained both a symbol of pride and a reminder of unfulfilled promises. For Africans, he was the father of unity. For Rastafarians, he was and remains God incarnate, eternal and unbroken. And for the world, he stands as one of the 20th century's most iconic leaders, flawed yet unforgettable. So who was Haile Selassie truly? A visionary who guided Ethiopia through storms of empire and war. A flawed monarch who clung to old ways while his people suffered? A divine messiah? Or simply a man elevated by history and faith? Perhaps he was all of these, for greatness is never simple. His story forces us to grapple with uncomfortable truths, that a man can be both liberator and autocrat, both beacon and shadow, both lion and lamb. But maybe that is what makes his legacy so enduring. Haile Selassie's life was a mirror of Ethiopia itself. Ancient yet modern, proud yet wounded, resilient yet fragile. He stood at the crossroads of history, where Africa declared to the world that it would not be erased. And even now, his words echo. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, the dream of lasting peace will remain but a fleeting illusion. This is not just the story of an emperor. It is the story of a man who carried a nation's pride, who walked the fine line between divinity and humanity, who rose and fell but left behind a roar that cannot be silenced. Emperor Haile Selassie's legacy is not finished. It is still being written every time a people stand against oppression, every time Africa asserts its dignity, every time the voice of the voiceless rises in defiance. The Lion of Judah may have fallen, but his spirit still prowls in the hearts of those who refuse to kneel.